All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sir Jude, and this is our video lecture for our lessons this morning, no, about collision theory and reaction rate. So in this chemical equation, you see we have methane CH4 reacting with two molecules of diatomic oxygen O2, producing one molecule of carbon dioxide CO2 and two molecules of water H2O. So judging by the placements or positions of the reagents. So what types of reagents are CH4 and O2? Since both of them are located at the left side of the arrow, we will classify CH4 and O2 as our reactants. On the other hand, since both CO2 and H2O are found at the right side of the arrow, therefore we will classify them as products. Question number two, what type of chemical reaction was represented above? So as you can see, you have the three specific molecules included for combustion, given that we are graced by the presence of O2, CO2, and H2O. But since that was our these were our previous lessons, no? So how can we say a reaction is successful before the formation of the product? So because I already taught you the parts of a chemical reaction, as well as balancing and the types of chemical reaction, our main goal for this session is to determine when is a reaction considered successful or not. Okay? And that is where that is where collision theory enters our picture. Wait lang po. Ayun. Okay. So let's say for example, our main goal is to produce a beverage called orange juice, no? Not from actual orange fruit extract, no? But let's say from tang powder and as well as a little bit of several tablespoons of sugar, as well as of course a pitcher of or a jar of water, no? So we will classify tang powder, then table sugar and water as our reactants, and orange juice as our product. Now, so will the orange juice mix or will the ingredients of the orange juice mix if you just put them together in one pitcher? So obviously not. And for them to mix, you have to literally mix them using a spoon or sometimes a fork or even a spatula. Therefore, for a chemical reaction to occur, we must meet at least three criteria. And the first criteria is the collision of reactants. And this makes sense to us because no, uh, for your products to be produced or to be formed, no, the reactants must be compressed or colliding with each other. Okay. How about this next question? Will the orange juice taste well if they were mixed nonchalantly? So obviously, not, no, because gentle mixing does not produce or yield the probably the most delicious flavor of orange juice. You have to mix them, or if you were using a blender or if you are shaking your the glass, no, then therefore those were better options, no. So you have to mix them in with a certain amount of energy in order for the ingredients to blend together. So the second criteria for a chemical reaction to occur, there must also be sufficient energy. Okay, and last question, will the orange juice be as it is if its ingredients are all solid? Let's say we replace liquid water with solid water, which is ice. And obviously, that will not mix together with sugar and the tang powder. So therefore, we won't be having any orange juice at all, let alone be liquid orange juice. So therefore, for a chemical reaction to occur, there must be proper orientation. So these are the assumptions, three assumptions under collision theory, that for a chemical reaction to occur, there must be collision of reactants, sufficient energy, and proper orientation. Ayan, no? So let's have another scenario. When striking a match head against the phosphorus-coated surface of the box, the friction from the rapid interaction triggers a combustion reaction. No? So cite which assumptions of collision theory is applicable in each scenario and justify why. And in this specific scenario, actually all of them are applicable when you strike a match head against the phosphorus-coated surface of the box. Let's start with collision of reactants. So obviously, no, for if you want to produce a fire from the matchstick, you have to rub or strike the match head against the surface surface of the box coated with phosphorus. So that's one. And for sufficient energy, no, you can't just produce a fire if you strike them very gently, or if you're not trying to introduce any effort at all. That's why you have to, of course naman, you don't have to be super strong or rigorous to the point that the matchstick will break. So just the right amount of energy that can produce the fire will do. But sometimes it will take you several attempts for you to accomplish your actual goal. Okay? Now, for three, proper orientation is not all sides or not all faces or not all surface of the box is actually phosphorus coated. So you have to make sure that that the match head will be oriented properly to the phosphorus coated surface of the box. Okay? So basically that's what collision theory is all about, no? Just have to meet these three criteria in order for the reaction to proceed as it is. Now, let's move on. Predict which reaction manifests slower or faster and justify why. So you have two reactions here. So on the left, you have food digestion, turning food, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's a loaf of bread or a piece of bread, and turning it into poop, no? And the other one is burning a matchstick once again. So as we know, food digestion takes an enormous amount of time because it passes through several organs that breaks down the food and then allows uh, decomposed nutrients to enter different parts of our body through our red blood cell to our blood, and the undigested waste to be expelled by our anuses, no? And that takes around 6 to 8 hours, or probably 6 to 10 hours. Kaya the reaction is so slow. However, when it comes to burning a match, no, of course that's not spontaneous in a way that you still have to initiate it. But once the match starts lighting, then it will take you only several seconds for the matchstick to be fully burned or consumed, no? So basically, from this slide, we can infer that there are some reactions that take too slow, and there are some reactions that take fast. Okay? And speaking of how slow or how rate a reaction occurs, no, that will be tackled under reaction rate. Now, what because qualitatively in reaction rate, we observe, no, whether a reaction is slow or fast. Quantitatively, we compute reaction rate using the formula VF minus VI divided by TF minus TI. So what does V and T mean, knowing that I and F correspond to initial and final respectively, no? So assuming you have a sample chemical reaction wherein you have reactants on the left side of the arrow and products on the right side of the arrow, and let's use a graph to visually see the trend, no, of the concentration or amount of reactants and products over time. And given that, we will designate volume on the y-axis. So that's V, no? And we will designate time at the x-axis. So that corresponds for letter T. And in a chemical reaction, we expect the reactants or the volume of the reactants to decrease over a certain amount of time. Therefore, the red curve going downward represents the disappearance of the reactants. And coincidingly, we expect that these reactants are slowly forming towards the product. So in this blue curve, you see that the volume of the products increases over time. So that's why the blue curve corresponds to the appearance of the products. Okay? Now, given this reaction, burning of coal, so coal here is corresponded to solid carbon. And of course, this is combustion. That's why we need gaseous diatomic oxygen O2, forming gaseous carbon dioxide CO2, which is the smoke emitted whenever we grill food, no? So which reagent or reagents represents the blue and red curves? Let's start with blue curve first. In the blue curve, we can see that the volume of this certain reagent is increasing over time. Then therefore, we expect that the blue curve represents the product. So our product here is gaseous carbon dioxide. On the other hand, the red curve represents the decreasing volume of a certain reagent or reagents over time. Then therefore, the red curve corresponds to the reactants, which are solid carbon and gaseous diatomic oxygen. Okay, so this is basically what reaction rate is all about. Now, but mostly what I've talked about so far is purely qualitative. So let's try to inject a little bit of quantitative aspect to our discussion. Okay? So given the reaction we're in, 1 mole of solid magnesium Mg reacts with 2 moles of aqueous hydrochloric acid HCl, forming 1 mole of aqueous magnesium chloride MgCl2 and 1 mole of gaseous diatomic hydrogen H2, no? So the amount or concentration of the reactants and the products are represented by a blue curve and an orange curve. Okay? So, palitan ko lang. Yan. So, does the blue curve manifest the appearance or disappearance of reagents? I don't specifically denote whether it's reactant or the products, no? But as you can see in the blue curve, it represents decreasing volume over time. So therefore, you have the disappearance of reagents. In this case, we're referring to reactants. Okay? Now, for number 2, does the orange curve manifest the appearance or disappearance of reagents? And as you can see, the trend for the orange curve, no, it increases over time. Kaya we have the appearance of reagents. Now, which reagents among the reaction represent the blue curve and the orange curve? Let's start with the blue curve first. The blue curve represents the disappearance of reagents, therefore we're pertaining to reactants, and our reactants are solid magnesium and aqueous hydrochloric acid. On the other hand, for the orange curve, which represents the appearance of certain reagents, I'm talking about the products, and the products are aqueous magnesium chloride and diatomic hydrogen, H2. All right, so let's have some calculations now. Number 4. Okay, so before we start computing, let me just write the formula of rate somewhere here. So rate is equivalent to final volume minus initial volume over final time minus initial time. Number 4, what is the rate of appearance of magnesium chloride MgCl2 from 0 to 10 seconds? MgCl2 is a product, and as we know that the trend for the product, its volume has to be increasing. That's why we will be using the orange curve. Okay, so I write rate here. I'd like to start with time first, no? And according to our question here, we're covering the period from 0 to 10 seconds. So initial time is 0 seconds, but I'll write it here at the bottom right side of the formula or the equation. And the final time is 10 seconds. So I write it here at the bottom left. And you have the minus sign at the middle. Okay? Then let's start interpreting or plotting the volume. No? Let's start with 0 seconds here. No? And as you can see, its corresponding volume is also 0 ml. And lastly, for 10 seconds, which is here, no? It corresponds to amount of 20 ml. Then minus sign at the center. So you have 20 ml minus 0 ml, that is 20 ml, divided by 10 seconds minus 0 seconds, this is 10 seconds, giving us a quotient of 2, positive 2 milliliters per second. Ayan. So that is our rate uh, of appearance of MgCl2 from 0 to 10 seconds. It's positive because we expect that the amount of that the products are emerging. Okay? Now, for number 5, what is the rate of disappearance of HCl from 30 to 50 seconds? And HCl is one of the reactants. And as a reactant, we're going to follow the blue curve. Okay? So I'd like to start with time first. And the period that we're covering is from 30 to 50 seconds. So initial time is 30 seconds. Final time is 50 seconds. And you put the minus sign at the middle. Then, going back to the graph, no, at 30 seconds, the amount of HCl is around 10 milliliters. Okay. And at 50 seconds, the amount of HCl is between 0 to 10 ml. And kanina sa klase, we decided that it's 5 ml. No? So you have 5 ml minus 10 ml, that's negative 5 ml. Divided by 50 seconds minus 30 seconds, that's 20 seconds. Okay? So, this is negative 1/4 milliliters per second. And we'd like to express our answers in decimal points so we can compare it with other numbers, no? So, the answer must be negative 0.25 milliliters per second. The negative sign indicates us that the amount or volume of the reaction is, or the reactant rather, HCl is decreasing. Okay. Next is number 6. At what time did the reaction reach its completion? Okay, so this is something that we don't have to solve anymore, no, because it doesn't pertain to rate. But what you can see is, if we extend both curves to the right, we know that at some point, they will reach, what do you call this? At some point, no, their concentration will now be staying at the same level. It will neither increase nor decrease anymore. And that will begin at the 60-second mark. So therefore, this reaction only took place for exactly 60 seconds or 1 minute. Or basically, it will end at exactly 60 seconds or 1 minute, judging by the values on the graph. Okay, so that is all for our lessons today. We covered 2 lessons in one session, and we will be having our final grand beta tomorrow. So I hope that you will be bringing all the materials and reviewing the procedure so that we won't be having any long conversation, or we will consume our time wisely when it comes to processing the experiments and the answers in preparation for our upcoming lesson. Okay? But till then, this is Sir Jude. Good afternoon and stay safe.